Coming up on a fresh edition of the Devil's Puck Luck podcast, let's go ahead and take a look after the NHL deadline has cleared. Where do the Devils stand in the Eastern Conference? Other teams around the league that made some really big moves. And ultimately, what are the new lines that we want to see when Timo Meier will make his debut? Not against the Vegas Knights, but it is coming soon. We'll break it all down next. Oh, my friends, wouldn't you know it? It's the Devil's Puck Luck podcast. As we told you at the top, he's Danny McDonough, your 20-year season ticket holder for your New Jersey Devils. I'm Adam Armbrecht. I cover the Brooklyn Nets for the Locked On Nets podcast. I cover the New York Giants on the One Giant podcast. And I cover the Devils on the Devil's Puck Luck podcast. And Danny, we did our first episode to rave reviews.
Yeah, no, thank you, everybody who took the time to listen.
Champing at the bit for more content here.
Absolutely. You all right there, buddy?
I want to make sure that I really got my palate ready for this conversation that we're going to get into. So off the top, we're going to talk a little bit more about specifically the Devils. A minor move got made, and let's just start there. We'll take a look at the lines. We'll go around the league a little bit, and then we'll preview the Vegas Knights matchup tonight, which, most important news, at least from a Devils fan perspective, no debut for Timo Meier tonight. We'll wait to see. Taken off of, though, the injury list. Just not going to be available for this evening. Do you, when you look at the minor move, before we even mention the move, were you disappointed that the Devils didn't make that next big play, something that really bolstered their depth a little bit more beyond the Timo Meier trade?
I think there was a lot of players off the board, Domi being one of them, going to the Dallas Stars. I was not disappointed. I actually really liked the move, and I think a lot of Devils fans, when they heard the name Lazar, they're like, who? Why? What happened? He's got 5 points. So I think a lot of Devils fans and a lot of NHL fans out there were kind of confused by the move. I love the move. I think that is going to add to the depth that we need the bottom six.
Also, hold on.
Wait, don't go to Wood. You can't go to Wood.
Hold on. So the first thing you like about it, I like the depth. We get that. But you mentioned this when we were preparing. You like also that he signed through 2024-25, only $1 million per year. Yes. So you have, some nice flexibility there. But the real reason you like it is because you feel like it's getting Wood further out of your lineup.
No, I still think Wood's going to play, believe it or not. I think the BMW line is going to stay intact, and we'll get to how Wood had a great game against the Avalanche. And listen, I can admit that. If you're following us on Twitter, you know that I've said that and I admitted it. He had a great game. I think one of his best of the year, actually. But no, I think the BMW line is going to stay intact. Lazard, actually, believe it or not, I think is going to be put in the lineup in place of someone like Boquist. I've said it many times. I think Sharangovich has slipped a little bit, and I think he needs a wake-up call, so he might be put in the lineup for him and give Sharangovich a wake-up call, maybe. But like you said, this move is not just for this year. This move is going to add to the depth for next year, when most likely we are not going to sign Wood again.
And I don't hate you start to see that there. I don't hate the idea of bringing in a guy to pressure other players, right? Because that's a part of what you can accomplish over the back end of this season here is let's just confirm or deny if our depth is where it needs to be. So a player like Lazar, you bring him in. Hopefully it does push some of those players to just get the best possible rotations going through. One little note. I can't throw that one away just yet because Harrington came over in the trade for Timo Meier. He's now a Duck after going off of waivers. That's a big one. That one's a big one here.
Thank you for the tenure time as a New Jersey Devil, Harrington.
Seemed a little bit sarcastic. But as we turn our attention then to the lines for the Devils now, talked about it in the last game on the broadcast. They were saying it's going to be really hard to break up that Mercer line. It's just playing so well. You like how complementary they are with one another. So then that's the Timo Jack line then we're going to be moving to.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great for Jack. I think that he's struggling a little right now. And for Jack to struggle, that means he's still playing very well in NHL standards. He's still playing fine. A lot of people think that his injury is lingering, and even a 90% Jack or an 85% Jack is still going to be great. I think he's struggling with Sharangovich on that line. Watching the Avalanche game specifically, I saw some plays that basically Sharangovich didn't finish. Nice passes from Jack and from Bratt. And I think getting that spark, obviously, with Timo on that second line with him is going to be awesome. I think you're going to see a lot of goal scoring. I think you're going to see a lot of passing that is gorgeous, like gorgeous, like the Hughes to Bratt pass. Yeah, gorgeous. But it's going to be fun because remember, these two guys, Jack and Timo, shoot a lot. They shoot the puck a lot, but they also can definitely pass the puck. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
So that you mentioned about not maybe being rewarded on some of his passes, Hughes, when you're playing on that line, and he has a great combination with Bratt. Do you then think that inserting Timo Meier affords Hughes to be a table setter for bigger stretches of the game, where then that pressure, like what we saw a lot in these recent games, is a lot of overskating, trying to get to some place on the ice where he can have an opportunity. Does this make it easier for him to say, well, if I make the good, clean, crisp pass, like that little skate pick in the ice reverse that he got over on the back post to Bratt, like, is that what we could see more of down here, where the scoring of goals is not as important to Jack Hughes in the short term getting to the playoffs?
I think it's going to be a nice combination of Timo and Jack scoring. I think you're going to still see his numbers. He's going to get 50 goals this year. I think he's on pace to get 51 or something like that. He's definitely going to get 50.
He's second in assists on the team as it is at right now.
Right. So he's still going to do what he's doing. You know what I mean? There's not going to be a lot of change in his game. I think just being able to have that physical winger for Jack is going to help so much, getting those dirty pucks, near the net, cleaning up like that. So this is technically the number 2 line, because you're going to call the Nico line and the Mercer line and the Tuna line the number 1, but these are 2 number 1 lines.
Yeah.
They're just 2 number 1 lines. And for the top 6, they're going to compete with any team in the NHL.
Okay. I agree with you.
But
I'm not here to push you.
But here's the thing. And I want to know from Devil fans too, when we release this episode.
Comments in the YouTube channel where you can subscribe as well.
Absolutely. Sharangovich is really, really, really struggling. And I think that is one of the big things that the Devils organization needs to look at in the next 5-6 games going forward. Because realistically, if you're going to have him playing with top 6 type lines.
But he's not now, though, is he?
He's not going to after Timo comes in. Right. But now he is, because the lineup staying exactly the same from last game. He struggled. He's sloppy against the boards. He's giving the puck up in the neutral zone. He's defensively not getting his assignments. He's played well on the PK. He's done well on the penalty kill. But he's a liability on that second line. And realistically, for me, when Lazard is inserted into the lineup with Timo back, he's the odd man out right now. To me, he's the odd man out.
Because I was gonna say, like, what adjustments would you make going into lines 3 and lines 4? But you're saying that you drop him right out of.
I'm taking
him off the board.
Yeah, I'm putting Timo on the second line, and I'm giving. Honestly, tonight, what I would do is I'd probably put Palat on the second line, but I know that's not going to happen, because it's just right now the way every line is rolling.
Why don't you just use Wood? Why don't you just use Wood?
The way every line was rolling against the Avalanche offensively.
Why would you mess with it?
Lindy's not going to touch those lines. No, you can't.
Yeah, the production's at least been there anyway. Little side note on Domi, who you had mentioned as being a guy that you might like. 49 points in 60 games, led the team.
Yeah,
for the Chicago Blackhawks. And they just really,
it's a great throw.
They jettisoned off camera. It's going really well for us over here. They just kind of shot him out of a cannon. It's funny to me, man. I know that the Blackhawks aren't the Blackhawks from a few years ago. But it's weird to see Kane go. We're going to turn our attention here in a second to the NHL overall and other teams that make some big moves. The Rangers are among them. The Bruins are among them. The Toronto Maple Leafs are among them. But the Chicago Blackhawks are going to need a little bit of time here, which I just think is interesting for a team that's obviously been a stalwart in these last handful of seasons.
I mean, the times have changed, right? Looking at an original 6 team that's not competing, they're just a bad team right now. And it's unfortunate for the Chicago Blackhawk fans, but it's going to go into rebuilding mode real quick for them.
Before we then turn our attention to the NHL at large, we're going to play a little game here. We're going to have some fun over the course of this podcast, because I do a lot of this work and I want to have a good time while I'm doing it. So a little bit of trivia here for you, Dan. I'm going to try to do my best to keep my ankles out of the shot. I don't know if anybody wants to experience that. This is what we'll affectionately be referring to. If not hockey, then what, Dan?
You're throwing me into the fire here.
If not hockey, What would these people be doing as their profession? On the left, everyone knows Timo Meier. You may not even recognize the guy on the right, who is Curtis Lazar.
Yes, I did know that.
Now, not you. I'm saying people in general. I know you knew who they were. Let's start with the less important acquisition here, okay. Lazar. If he was not an NHL hockey player, what would he be?
I see Lazar being that guy at like a Home Depot or Lowe's that's like the main manager, just smiling, like
okay,
greeting people coming in, dealing with the situations, right? Doesn't he have that kind of look to him?
Now, unfortunately,
and not to cut you off,
yeah,
he apparently, from what I'm hearing, is great for a locker room. So that's why I'm kind of thinking of him out front as like a manager type,
Interestingly enough, my partner Courtney, she saw the photo. She said maybe like a nurse, a male nurse of some kind, caring. Yeah. But the correct answer.
Oh, there's a correct answer.
Yeah,
here.
But the right answer that we were looking for, we would have accepted a poor man's Zach Wilson, who will be the star of the Hallmark movie about his life. That would be the option there. Jets fans out there will appreciate that. Fans. And we can let's see if we can do a little bit of this here. Bring ourselves up. We'll leave that just the way it is. Quickly here, though, before we move on, Timo Meier. Take a look at that gentleman over there. Let's keep it clean. What do you think he would be doing if not playing hockey?
Keeping it clean, right? We're keeping it clean.
Yeah, we're a family podcast, and we're also a team podcast too. As a member of the organization now.
I'm going to go ahead and say I see him being like a hedge fund guy, a financial analyst. I can see him on Wall Street, you know what I mean? A very serious guy that is going to make some serious money.
This is not even a joke. Let's go ahead and drop the coverage here, friends, so you can see that is correct.
Wait, did you really have
one of the two answers was term life insurance salesman or hedge fund shark. It's right there on the top. It's right there at the top.
You really have it.
Got it. Hedge fund shark. So bottom line is both Timo and Lazar have some options for themselves if it doesn't work out at the NHL level.
You're really keeping me on my toes here.
That's right. Let's turn our attention now, if we could, over to the NHL at wide. I mentioned some of the teams that made some big moves. When you saw Toronto adding 5 total, a lot of defense, a lot of depth, a lot of pressure for them now, though, because this was an all-in kind of when you get 5 guys. When you bring in 5 guys, I think you're making a pretty big statement, not only about what you want to do, but also about why you had to go do this.
Well, I love Ryan O'Reilly on that team, and now the East is such a juggernaut. We talked about this in our first episode that all these teams in the East
X-Men.
What's that?
Juggernaut.
Yes.
X-Men.
Yes. Yeah. You just went with it. You just rolled with it. No, but the East is a powerhouse.
Try to stay focused. Okay?
They're a powerhouse. And at the end of the day, all these teams are going to try and make that significant move. Toronto is one of them. They had, to me, one of the best trade deadlines. Boston is another one. I don't even know how Boston is getting better and better, but they're somehow doing it. This team is ridiculous.
I was reading an article. It was like, who won the trade deadline? You go through the grades. Yeah. Devils did well in there, certainly. But it was like, and who's the team to beat? And then the tagline was, well, the Bruins, obviously, because they were already, and now they somehow got better.
Yeah, Orlov, Hathaway, signing Pasta to a $90 million extension. It's unbelievable what
Sounds
they're doing
delicious.
in Boston. It is delicious for the city of Boston, I'm telling you. But they're going all in now because they're a veteran team. You know what I mean? They're clicking on all cylinders right now. So it's a matter of really just putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak, and just, did I say that right? Pedal to the metal?
Pedal to the metal.
I said it right.
Yeah,
I said it right. But just going for it, you know what I mean? They're that good. That
you should have just gone for
better.
it with that saying.
Just made sure
would have been better.
But no, and going back to your Toronto thing too, Toronto losing in the first round of the playoffs has been brutal for that city, and they're going to run into Tampa again, and there's a very good chance they could lose in 6 or 7. And it's with the East, it's anybody. We were talking about this first episode. It's. If the Canes play the Rangers, think about the Canes playing the Rangers if we get the number 1 spot in the Metro, which I still think we can do. There's so many powerhouse teams in the East that anybody can literally come out of the East right now.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that. Anybody, to me, can go and play Boston. There's 4 teams that are very likely to play Boston.
The most important distinction there is any team that makes the playoffs can come out of the East.
Clearly.
You don't get to go if you're not in it. So some teams won't be able to do that. The other one, obviously, Kane ends up with the Rangers finally. Didn't look good in his first game, though. Am I right?
No, I didn't.
He's not the same player that he was. But is that the difference between? Because I guess when you think about the Devils and adding Lazar, it's like this little marginal move. Kane is more of a name. But how do you look at that, the way the Rangers seem to say, like, there's something else here that we need in theory? Like, they're going to try to squeeze some last drop of Kane to get value on the back end of this season.
Listen, the Rangers are one of the teams. They're one of my top teams at the trade deadline. They added Tarasenko. What you saw against Ottawa, if you guys watched that game last night, Tarasenko is coming into his own now, and he's starting to click. And, you know, he was struggling a little bit earlier in the year, obviously, but now that he's with the Rangers, he's really starting to find that groove. And that goal yesterday was unbelievable. I don't know if you saw that goal that he had, but I think it's going to be the same thing for Kane. Give him a couple games to adjust, and it's Patrick Kane. He's going to be fine. He's going to be great. He has the playoff experience. This is what the Rangers wanted to do. They didn't give up a lot to get him. So, you know, they're one of the teams that definitely did win at the trade deadline.
Brown to the Senators. A little bit of center depth there. Thought that was a nice pickup.
Chickering to the Senators. Senators are another team that had an incredible.
Chickering was, I mean, obviously,
phenomenal trade deadline too.
It is funny that some of this is like a lot of the other trades. Some trades happened far earlier,
sure,
and then by the back end of it, before we started to record, it's like you're just backtracking, and some of them are marginal moves. Like a lot of the, like, just before the deadline ones become a little more marginal.
This has been an absolutely insane trade deadline for the NHL. It's been a lot of fun. There's a lot of moves, and it's because the East is that good, you know. And I know we're talking about it a lot, but you know, these teams are now competing. You know, they're competing they're basically right there with each other when it comes to talent level. And playoff hockey is a different type of hockey. It's a completely new season. It is a different animal. So, you know, one of the reasons for me why I put the Rangers up there as one of the winners in the trade deadline, Tarasenko and Kane have that experience, you know, and now obviously, you know, Kane playing with Panarin, they have that connection. So,
oh, that's right.
Yeah,
right.
It's an absolutely great move for the team, for the organization to move forward and try to really push, you know, in the playoffs. And for the Devils is the Devils are winners because we added a young superstar, which to me was the best offensive player that was available at the trade deadline.
So do you think out of the teams, and then we'll one last footnote, and then we'll move into a little bit of game preview and reaction from the last one there where the Devils put up 7 goals against the Avalanche. Do you, when you look about the moves that were made, do the Devils fall into the category of made a move for now and for later? And does that matter, the distinction between what you accomplish now versus later? Like the Rangers who were saying, the guys we brought in, it's about right now, it's about this year, it's about what we want to accomplish, right? And we talked first episode about how the Devils can be set up for success long-term. Absolutely. So do you make that distinction when you look around the league?
You do. I mean, you see some of the teams like Boston, for instance, you know, what they're adding now is essentially they're going into it this year saying, we're going to win the cup. You know, adding Orlov and Hathaway the way they did as well. They're going in to win the cup. You know, it's they know that they have a veteran team. Obviously, signing Pastrnak to the extension is huge for the future for that team too. But you know, to me, Boston was not supposed to nearly do what they did this year, and they're just running away in the East, and they're going to go all in, obviously.
So you get influenced by surprising yourself with 100%. Where your team is, and then you think, oh, well, now if we had pieces,
right? Exactly. And to answer your question, with obviously Timo Meier coming here to the Devils, it's not just about now. We're pushing for now, and we are definitely contending for the cup. But it's about the future too. You know, this team, to me, for the next 4 or 5 years, is going to be contending for the cup.
Last note: neither the neither of the Van Riemsdykes went anywhere, including younger brother Trevor, who stays in Washington, and that went from being maybe getting traded to they'll probably talk to him about extension.
Washington did a great job as sellers too. They got a lot of pieces back, a lot of picks, a lot of cap moved. Same with Nashville. You know, Nashville has like 9 picks now.
Yeah.
And they moved some money around, which was great. But no, that doesn't surprise me too much. I know that James Van Riemsdyk, there was a deal in place with the Red Wings and it fell apart. But no, it doesn't surprise me too much. The Middletown, New Jersey natives didn't get moved.
That's right. They're from local boys. That being the case, then, let's turn our attention to not only the Vegas Knights tonight. You'll get to see this in 2 formats. If you're watching this right now as it's premiering, you can also be jumping over and just seeing just the takeaways from last game and then looking forward to this game. Well, let's go back at that Avalanche game. I mentioned it there. 7 goal scorers, 7 different goal scorers. None of them named Jack Hughes. That, in a way, I think should actually be a great thing.
Of course.
Because it's just balance, it's consistency. You don't have to look at it from any one source. What else did you like coming out of that game? Box score wise, we look at it and kind of, I think typically we're going to see they get out hit 23-13. The physicality is something we'd like to see more of after the deadline, obviously. But what else did you like specifically coming out of that game beyond just what was an absolute, I'm going to call it total chaos in the second period when you have that many goals getting scored? Devils up 3-1 at the break and then end up in a real barn burner. I blew my parlay bet based on them scoring that empty netter.
We're gonna get to that. That's pretty funny. Yeah. No, listen, we were up 5-1 and then it was 5-4 in the second, so that was pretty scary. But jumping off, 2 words: fast start. We're talking about 21 comeback wins for this team. We don't want to worry about that as much moving forward, going toward the playoffs against these good teams that we're going to play. The fast start is huge and it is key for this team moving forward. You know what I loved about the, like you just said, Jack wasn't a scorer, and the fact that we're spreading the puck around and you have everybody scoring, Palat scoring, you got Wood scoring, Adam.
That's right.
Scored. He played well. He was grinding it out. He was beating people to the puck on the boards. Him and McLeod were directly responsible for that Hamilton goal too. So, that's what it's about. It's about forechecking. It's about finishing. And most importantly, it's about being physical and being aggressive on the boards, which is what this team needs.
One of the other things that I think I remember, I had to go and look, face-off percentages. When you were talking about the deadline, was one of those guys that you were looking at, because it just crossed my mind before we move on it. Games I've been to live with you, for the most part, I think the Devils do a nice job on face-offs.
Absolutely.
But did you want to add a little bit of depth there, just in terms of guys that you can rely on for those instances? Because I'm not noodle of a thought I had.
Yeah, no, I'm not too much worried about that. McLeod and Halla have definitely been great face-offs, with Nico doing it as well. So I'm not too concerned about that. For me, it was all about the physicality and adding the bigger wing, which we did with Timo, and obviously with Lazar being that defensive-minded forward that is a big body, led his team, the Canucks, in hits this year. So, he's going to push some bodies around, which is what we need. We need that physicality. We need that strong play on the boards, which from like a Sharangovich lacks, and you insert Timo right away and you're going to get a lot stronger play on the boards. I mean, it's the same thing with Lazard, and that's going to be the tough part, is finding out who is going to be out of this lineup. Because listen, everybody, even Boquist, if you see Boquist go out of this lineup, you're upset about it because he's been playing pretty well lately.
And that's the hard part about it. When we're using Wood as always the example, when there's a guy you feel like you want to have out of the lineup, it's so much easier to say bring in someone else and just shove them down the list. The more difficult thing is when you feel like guys are playing so well and you still want to get better, and hopefully they don't end up having not a bad reaction, but just bad results in terms of having to adjust their expectations, how many minutes they're playing, what lines they're on, right? So there's going to be some chemistry shift here too. Guys that have all been playing all year together, but now line to line, you're going to see some differences there once Timo goes in. Yeah, and I think going back to what we were talking about with the Rangers and Kane having a bad game, last night against the Senators, I think it's just face value looking at it. It's like, this is a brand new team, that he's playing with. This is brand new lines he's playing with. The chemistry is always going to be different when you go in and you jump in. And Devils fans too, don't get nervous if Timo comes out the first game or two and it doesn't look as fluid. You expect that, it's part of the learning process and the growing process. And one of the big reasons why I think Lindy's keeping him out of the lineup, now he's available for contact, obviously practice. He's got to get some practice in with these guys. The lines have to roll in the right way, and you just don't want to force something when it's not there and you don't feel comfortable with it yet. And obviously you want to make sure Timo's 100% healthy. Do you think that how much of the timeline of him getting into live game action is just cautiously being pushed back to afford some more practices? Like, what will they learn? Not even about Timo and the first two lines, but can it be more about lines 3, lines 4? Let's see how those things get shifted once Timo's out on the ice.
Yes and no. I don't think you want to insert Timo in a place like Vegas, being one of the best teams in the West that's going to bang some bodies around. I really don't think you want to do that. I can definitely see him playing against the Coyotes on Sunday. Okay. My bet would be he's going to play against the Maple Leafs on the 7th at home. I think it'll be a great first game for him. He's going to have those anxious butterflies. It's going to be a phenomenal atmosphere when we come back to Prudential Center. But, I just look at it like that, Adam. I don't really look at it too much deeper than I think that it's just a matter of making sure, number one, that he's 100% healthy. Number two, making sure he has those contact practices and really gets more under his belt so that he is good to go and feels confident that he's ready to go too.
Okay, so the Devils get the win in Colorado. Here's a good moment to take a pause before we preview the Vegas Knights matchup a little bit. It's a friendly reminder. So if you were listening to the first episode, as well you should be, subscribing on YouTube, getting it on the podcast feed, following us on social, we said, mostly Danny said, because they're not my tickets, you're going to be giving away tickets later this month in March to fans that subscribe, that like, that support the podcast, but also that string together a handful of what'll be key terms to form. It's probably not going to be a phrase like a sentence, but there'll be some things and they all come together and you get yourself a pair of tickets. And that first term, that first word, that first name is going to be Smid, because 12 saves between the pipes in that Avalanche game in relief. Like, that game was going fully off the rails. And in a lot of ways, the goalie switch it was the thing that changed it, because neither goalie was having a particularly solid game. Write that name down first and foremost. But you were just saying, I mean, he's a young player, obviously, young goaltender, but the sample size has been great for him when he's played.
Akira's looked great. You know, I think he's going to be in this organization for a while. I was super impressed how he came in Colorado and shut the door in the third period, you know?
And at that point, it happens in hockey all the time. It's, you take the chance of, if it's not there for our starter, why don't we go ahead and just see if we can get something changed here?
Yeah, well, that goes back to the big question: is Vitek okay, and is this just a little lapse and just a little bit of a downturn, which he'll be fine?
Could I ask you a very interesting question about the goalie situation?
Okay.
When you look at their average goals against per game, I mean, Vitek is the guy, whatever. But do you have a concern level down the back end of the season here, just around? I mean, we know you want your goalie to be hot at the right time.
I think the only concern level is knowing how the Devils' goaltending was last year, and, you know, kind of seeing it this year flourish into something that was phenomenal. I don't think anybody expected. I'm not concerned, really.
But you have that little bit of, like,
I have like that
PTSD
little thought, like, for the love of God, please still play well goaltending wise. I think Vitek's okay. I think he's in his head a little bit. And if you look at some of the actual images, there was a picture, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter, where he was just like buried down with his hat over his eyes, you know, kind of looking defeated. And, you know, to me, that's where the Nico step up. That's where the Palat step up and go to that goaltender and your defenseman, your core defenseman.
Right.
Hamilton, you know, the Siegenthalers, the Graves, go to him and be like, big guy, we got you. You're not going to have a phenomenal game every game. You know, there's going to be points in the season where you're going to have a little bit of a rut, you know, and it's his defensemen especially need to pick him up and be like, listen, big guy, we got you. You know, you're going to be good. You're going to get back in there. You're going to go into the game and you're going to be great. So, but Akira,
that wasn't, you know, I'm very curious to see what happens, if I'm being honest, because I just,
you're nervous.
Well, you know, it's not even that. Well, no, so two things happen here.
I can see it in your face a little bit. You look behind the curtain.
No, well, here's my two things. One, I love young dudes that are playing well.
Okay.
And I love seeing, I love any young talent that's doing a great job at whatever they're doing, whether it's sports or otherwise. I once saw, there was a kid playing hopscotch, and I'm talking two-stepping, just right across the board. No problems. I said, this guy has a future. He went back to school, and
you never saw him again after that.
I guess I don't know if that's going to take off as a sport, but the bottom line is there's some options out there for people. I know, but like when I see Smid playing the way that he is, the sample size is so small, but in the NHL, when the hot glove is working, you ride with it. So I'm just like, I don't know. I'm like, when do you start? When you piece together, you got a veteran who's kind of sulking on the bench, having a bad game. Those games are going to come. You have the playoffs looming. Like, at some point you want to check that box. I think the comfortable thing is that, you know, you can always take a chance on something in game, in a playoff game. When you're down 3 goals, you try to switch it up a little bit. I just like certainty. And sometimes when you project what you think a player can be a year from now or 2 years from now, sometimes you get excited to want that to be happening as soon as possible.
There's no certainty in the NHL or sports for that matter. You know that too. It's, you know, anybody's job is basically replaceable, you know, and playoff hockey, especially. You've seen a lot of cup teams that go with, you know, Boston, especially. You've seen a lot of cup teams that have gone into playoffs and they're riding the hot hand. They're riding a goaltender that is absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
You know, so does it mean Akira maybe gets really, really, really hot and we play him in the playoffs? Maybe, but I don't think Vitek is going to fall off that much where you're going to have that concern.
Right, you'd have to string together 3-4 more bad performances.
Point being is, let's not overreact about it. Let's just kind of chalk it up to just a little bit of a downside in the season for him. I think he's going to be fine. I'm pretty confident that he's going to be fine. I also think that the Devils are going to clean up a lot of the things they've been doing defensively. So I think
that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, of course. So,
12 saves by Smid, while impressive, doesn't mean that there weren't things that weren't going correctly before he got into goal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the crazy thing is too, is, Vitek gave up those goals, and it was 3 goals in about 5 minutes to make it a 5-4 game. There was a couple defensive lapses, obviously.
Right.
It's some of those saves should have been made, obviously. He wants at least 2 of those goals back. But at the end of the day, it's really cleaning up the areas in front of your net, defensively. That's definitely going to help this team moving forward.
Right now, the puck luck, you guys get it, is a little bit more in Smid's favor when it comes to those little bounces and stuff. Correct. When Smid first got in the game, I think one of his first saves was just pinning his elbow and just pinning the puck to himself until the whistle blew. He didn't fully know where it was, if it had gotten past him or behind him. And it's like, again, hey, you made the save, but that's that little difference sometimes in the way that we look at things. You get us over on Twitter at Danny the Face, at Adam Armbrecht, and also at NJ Devils PL. That'll be the official show handle, YouTube, and on the podcast, man. We're going to say this every single episode for the first 700 episodes. We're really trying to build this thing. We want to do it in the right way. We are quietly, without confirming any names at this moment, setting up some really good crossovers, some really good interviews that we're excited to bring to you guys to continue to flesh out not only about this team, but how we feel about them and how we want to cover them. So everyone's support is greatly appreciated. The first video on YouTube saw a really good push. So continue to support us, and we'll continue to support you as the New Jersey Devil faithful. Any thoughts before we go, Dan?
Let's go. Devils
you don't
tonight.
Call him. Oh, sorry.
What were we gonna say?
I didn't think you had anything to say.
Let's go Devils tonight, baby. Let's do it. Let's get this win.
You better believe it, my friends. And we know when that man is on the ice and trying to look nice, it's always going to be gravy.